Well, hey everybody, welcome to Reclaiming Irresistible, Part 4. Really today you can kind of think of this as Part 1 of Act 2 of a series of content that we've been going through together as we discover what it looks like for our church to be irresistible and to be likable to the community that is around us. In much the same way that Jesus was irresistible and likable to the community and the people that were around him when he was here on this earth. Now today, to start off our time, I want to invite you to kind of imagine with me once again in similar fashion to the way that I did in our last time together. This time I want you to imagine, once again, another church visit experience. This one was a little less personal because I wasn't interviewing with this church. It was just a church visit experience that my family had. And I have shared this experience in full detail with some of you, so some of this may be familiar to you. I'm not going to go into the full detail this time. Now, there were some things that stood out to us, like, we didn't really know where to park and how to get into the building. We just kind of followed the crowd. And once we got into the building, we didn't really know what we were doing, how to get our kids checked in, all of that stuff. But there were really kind of two big things that stood out to us in this church visit experience. The first one that we noticed was that when we finally made it into the auditorium and we found a row, 3 or 4 rows from the back, and slipped into that row by ourselves as a family, one of the first things that we noticed was that there were a lot of people in the room, and they were all gathered in little circles and laughing and talking and enjoying each other's company. And not one of those people came to us and said, "Hey, are you new here? Welcome, we're so glad that you're here." None of that. We didn't get welcomed by anybody. That was the first thing. But the second thing was kind of a little bit humorous if you think about it, and also not so humorous if you think about it. This was a church that they allowed the kids, or they had the kids stay in the auditorium with their parents until a certain point in the service when they dismissed the kids. And because this was a new place for us and we weren't really sure what to expect or where our kids were going to be or anything like that, my wife decided that just for her own peace of mind and security, that she would follow our kids down, make sure that they were good, they knew where they were going, all of that, and then she would come back into the auditorium. What she didn't know, what we didn't know, is that once they dismissed the kids, they locked the auditorium doors. So here I am, I'm sitting in this service. It's just me and our 2 oldest at this point sitting in this row, and my wife is left with the 2 younger kids, and next thing I know, I get a text message in the middle of the sermon that my wife says, "I'm locked out." Well, what I didn't know was that when she said, "I'm locked out," she meant like she was literally locked out. They had taken chains and padlocks and chained and padlocked the auditorium doors from the outside for safety's sake, I guess. Next thing I know, my wife comes walking into this auditorium that's full of probably 300 people from the very front. It's in the middle of the message, and she comes in these doors that are just off the side of the stage, and she walks by all 300 people in this auditorium to come back to me and our older 2 kids and to sit down with us at that point. It was embarrassing, it was awkward, it was kind of funny, and that was our experience. And then we got up, and as we walked out of the auditorium, again, nobody said anything to us. And I share that story with you again, similar to last week's story, because I just want us to imagine for just a moment that we are somebody in the community who is desperately seeking answers in their lives when it comes to their marriage or their parenting or their finances or whatever. And they've decided, I think that the church might be a place that we should check out. And so they take that risk. They put themselves in an uncomfortable situation to experience this thing. And then if they had had our experience, I can promise you, it would have been very strange for them. And there's a decent chance, if they were an unchurched person, that they might not ever come back again. And that's just kind of the thing that we want to make sure that we're doing the opposite of when it comes to Current. In fact, when our family made the decision to move back to Current and move back to St. Joe and to plant this church, we had a couple of things in mind. 2 of the things that we had in mind when it came to the kind of church that we wanted to create in this community is we wanted to create a place of safety and a place of curiosity. We wanted to create a safe place for people. Not just a safe place for like your kids, like physically safe environments, but we wanted to create a safe place for people that had questions, people that were maybe skeptical of our faith or what we believe, a place for them to come and feel safe to explore those things, a place for people who maybe felt hurt by the church or hurt by Christians in the past, a place where they could find Jesus and feel safe to do so. And we also wanted to create a place of curiosity, not just for people that are far from God or that are seeking or have questions about faith, but a place of curiosity for our leadership and our directors and the people that are volunteering. We want all of us to be curious about what it is that God is doing in our community and how we can be a part of what it is that He's doing. But that's going to require a little bit of humility on our part. It's going to require some flexibility to figure out what it is that God's doing in our community. Now, if you know me at all, if you've had any conversation with me, like gotten to know me at all, you probably know that I'm obsessed about something. I kind of have a little bit of an obsession, specifically when it comes to church. It's just kind of part of my personal wiring. And that personal wiring, that personal obsession ends up translating to our obsession as a church as well. And that is this, that we want to create a church where unchurched people love to engage with us. And there's a few different ways that we encourage people to engage with us. The one in particular that I want to talk about today is through our irresistible environments. We want to create irresistible environments for all ages and all stages of life, whether you're a kid, you're a student, you're an adult, you're a college student, you're single, you're married, you're divorced, whatever. We want to create irresistible environments for every age and every stage of life. And we're constantly asking this question as a church: how do we make our experiences intentional and engaging and unmissable? How do we make our experiences intentional, engaging, and unmissable? Now, you and I, as we're a part of this thing, as we're a part of making this thing at Current happen, we have a role to play in it. You have a role to play, and I have a role to play in making it intentional and engaging and unmissable for people. But that's not to say that it's all on us. I love what Reggie Campbell says in this devotional that I go through every single day. And one of the daily devotionals in this book that he wrote called Radical Wisdom, he says this, he says, God is in the outcomes business. We should be in the obedience business. Like, we need to just leave the outcomes to God and just be obedient to what it is that he's telling us to do. And so for us, that means that we feel like we should be obedient to this strategy that God has given us in order to reach this community. And what is that strategy? In many ways, our strategy, our vision as a church is simply to get out of the way of what it is that God's already doing. In many ways, our vision is to get out of the way and remove those obstacles, those hindrances, those distractions that people might encounter on their way to get to Jesus. We want to try and do everything we can to remove those things for people to hear a message about Jesus that matters. The very Jesus who gave us our mission as the church, not just our church, but the church, when he told us that we're to go and we're to make disciples, we're to make followers of him. Now, strategy asks this question, okay, now that we know what we're doing, now that we know that mission, now that we know why that's our mission, how are we going to actually pull that off? Because let's think about this for just a moment. People are constantly changing. Communities are constantly changing. And if that's the case, then being irresistible to people and communities that are changing will require us to make changes. And so we want to always be asking questions like, what are people's needs? What is it that they really need? What are the things that are distracting people from God? What are the things that people have made elevated as poor replacements in their lives for God? What are those things, and how can we speak to those things, and how can we leverage those things to connect people to God? The answers to those questions will always be changing, and so we want to make sure that we're adjusting and evaluating our strategy for that. So over the next 3 weeks, starting today, we're going to begin to dig into some of our core strategy pieces, some of the specifics, some of the details of how we actually plan to become irresistible as a church. Now, even though change is necessary because people are always changing and culture and communities are always changing, the core parts of what we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, they shouldn't really need to change because of the way that we are approaching those things. We're trying to create a fixed framework for determining whether or not we are successfully, over time, achieving that mission that Jesus gave us to go and make disciples, to go and make followers of him, to evaluate whether or not we are encouraging, equipping, and leading people to follow Jesus. And so we begin with this question right here. I mentioned we're going to talk about the first part of that vision statement for us today. So we begin with this question: what are the best environments for God to capture the hearts of people that are seeking, starting, or returning to faith? What are the best environments for us to capture the hearts of preschool age kids? What are the best environments for us to capture the hearts and the minds of elementary kids as they're developing? What are the best environments to capture the hearts of middle school or high school or college age students? What's the best environment for us to create to capture the heart and the mind, to engage people that are skeptics, that have questions, that have doubts about what it is that we believe? What are the best environments for us to engage young singles and engage married people? Today I want to talk about the importance of creating some irresistible environments for the people that we want to reach with the message of Jesus. We want to create a sense of welcome for people that have not yet felt like they're a part of Current. Maybe they're experiencing Current for the very first time. Now, in order to do that, we think that there are 3 essential ingredients to achieve irresistible environments. In fact, without any one of these 3 things, we think that as a church, we might be creating some unnecessary barriers, some unnecessary distractions that prevent people from connecting with God. So the first of those is going to feel very practical, but the first of those is that we want to create an appealing setting for people. Think about this. Pretty much every experience that you have in your life involves some sort of physical setting. Now in churches, the physical setting is often things like large rooms or maybe some smaller classroom type rooms or kids' rooms. They include things like the hallways and the lobby. They include things like parking. That's a physical setting that people experience when they come to our church, or even the bathrooms. That's a physical setting. And all of those places, when it comes to churches and really any experience that you have, but especially in churches, those places can either be appealing or they can be unappealing. There's often very little middle ground between those two things. They can be comfortable, or they can make people feel uncomfortable. They can be memorable for good or bad reasons, or they can be very forgettable. In fact, take just a moment and think about the last time that you ate at a restaurant and you didn't really enjoy the experience. Perhaps when you walked in, it just felt like it was the temperature was too cold, or maybe the music was just too loud and you didn't feel like you could have good conversation, or maybe the music was too quiet and you didn't feel like it created that energy and excitement that you were looking for in the restaurant. Perhaps you felt like the tables were too messy and you had to clean off your own table in order to sit at it, or the tables were too close and so you couldn't really have conversation with your people without feeling like other people were listening in as well. If you've ever had an experience like that, even if the food at that restaurant was fantastic, it's very likely that you didn't really enjoy the experience because of the distracting environment that was around you at the time. And then vice versa, think about maybe an experience that you've had in a restaurant that was wonderful. Like the whole experience was fantastic for you from start to finish. Think about the physical and the emotional effects that had on you. The truth is that all environments matter, because really what they're doing is they're setting the tone for how you feel about that place. And we want to set a good tone for how people feel about our church, because how they feel about us will really affect all kinds of things, including not only like whether or not they're going to come back, but it also includes whether or not they're going to hear what it is that we want to share with them. And we believe what we're sharing with them is important. So we want for our physical environments, the large rooms, the small rooms, the lobby, the hallways, the bathrooms, the kids' environments, we want all of those environments to be comfortable. We want them to be magnetic, and we want them to be irresistible. We want our church environments to make a really good first impression. Our environments will make a first impression for good or for bad. We want to make a good one. We want to send a message to people when they walk in our doors that, hey, we know what we're doing. Not only do we know what we're doing, we actually care about you, and we were expecting you, and we knew that you were coming, and we wanted to take care of you when you walked in our doors. If we create uncomfortable environments for people when they walk in, if we're not thinking about that intentionally, we have the potential of derailing what it is that we're trying to share with people, the message that we want them to hear and apply and believe. We could derail that before we ever even get to that point, simply because of the environment. The second thing that we want to do is that we want to create an engaging presentation for people. In fact, when people walk in our doors and they visit, the question that we want to ask is, was the presentation engaging? In fact, we don't really even ask the question, was the presentation true? The truth is, if you think about it, there are churches all over this community, all over the country, that are preaching true things. And that's an amazing thing. In fact, we pretty much assume that we're preaching the truth. But if we weren't preaching the truth, trust me, people would let us know that. We don't want to just simply ask the question, was it true? We want to ask the question, was the presentation engaging? We want people that are listening to what it is that we're sharing with them to connect that truth that we're teaching them. We want them to connect it with their life. Interestingly, Matthew tells us that after Jesus had preached, like arguably his greatest sermon that he ever preached in all of history, the Sermon on the Mount, this is what Matthew tells us. It says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, preaching that message, the crowds around him were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as somebody who had authority and not as their teachers of law. I think, as I examine the way that Jesus taught and the way that he communicated, he spoke, he wasn't just content to cover the material for people and then hope that they got it. He spoke with authority, and he spoke in an engaging way. He wasn't content to just simply speak the truth. That was important, but he wasn't content to just stop there. You see, Jesus came, he told us his purpose. We've talked about this. He came to seek and to save lost people. And so he communicated, and he did what he could to capture the hearts and the minds, to engage people to that end. And so we will communicate in very similar ways in our messages. We will wait to deliver content to people, deliver the actual content, the meat of what it is that we want them to get, until they're actually hungry for it. We want to create a hunger for that meat that we're about to give them. And so in order to do that, some of the things that we'll consider doing is we'll look and work towards identifying and coaching up engaging communicators in all of our environments, in all of our places that we're communicating, whether that's teaching, whether that's hosting, whether that's people that are singing, people that are sharing a Bible story. We want to identify them. We want to coach them up so that they are engaging communicators, and so that we can position them for maximum impact in people's lives. And then the third thing that we want to do is we want to provide helpful content. In fact, when we're evaluating all of our environments, we just want to ask this question: was it helpful? Was it an engaging presentation? That's an important question too, but that's only half of the equation. The other half of that equation is asking the question, will the audience know what to do with what it is that they've heard, with what it is that we've shared with them? What is helpful content? We think that helpful content is stuff that helps people think correctly, behave differently, or believe something deeply. In fact, the Apostle Paul, he kind of summed up this thought very well in Romans chapter 2, when he said, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We believe that presenting and providing like paradigm challenging, practical content that's helpful for people, that it will renew their minds. And Paul tells us that a renewed mind, that's what will actually produce transformation in the lives of people. So just like Jesus, the way that he taught, the way that he engaged with people, we want to help people think correctly, and we want to help them behave differently, or we want to help them believe something deeply. And so we will teach to that end and provide helpful content to that end. In fact, I think that's a big part of what made Jesus so irresistible and so engaging to the people that were around him. I don't want to be overly negative by any stretch of the imagination when it comes to this, but I think one of the reasons that people are becoming less and less engaged with the church right now, with Christians, is simply because we aren't really putting a whole lot of effort into being engaging. We simply think that preaching the truth is enough. But I think if we can figure out how to share the truth with people in an engaging way and provide it in a practical, helpful way for people, I think that will make all the difference in the world. And here at Current, we want to change that mentality. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to create irresistible environments? We're going to do it by creating an appealing setting, engaging presentation, and helpful content. I think if we can make our environments and make our presentations and make our content as engaging and helpful and as appealing as possible, it's going to make a world of difference for the people in our community. I believe that Jesus was engaging. I believe that he was irresistible. And if we are his body, and we are, then I think that should be the way we are to the community around us as well.